Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 192, Digital Imaging, Fall Semester 2021. Today, we will be working on Lesson 4, which covers the use of layers. So, as you can see on my screen, I have the final version to the left, and I have our start version to the right. If we look at the Layers panel, you can see that they have added a lot of layers. And in addition to the layers, they've added what are called adjustment layers to that. So before we actually go into the nitty gritty of the lesson itself, I'll start with the beginning file and point out to you all the different features that are available in the layers panel itself. Some of them I think are pretty obvious and self-explanatory, but it doesn't hurt to go over them anyway. So if we look at the panel itself, you can see that they have already added some additional layers for us, but they're just turned off. So to turn them back on and to make them visible, you click on the little eye icon to the left. To turn them off temporarily or permanently, you just simply click them off. If you want to rename or name a layer, then you just simply click on it and then double click on the text. It highlights in blue and you can rename it. By default, they come in as untitled or unnamed layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that sort of thing. So let's look at the top. And we can, right now, we can view the layers by kind. We can also view them by name. You can view them by effect, mode, attribute, color. So for us, we can pretty much leave it on kind 99% of the time. If you have a lot of layers, then what you'll need to do is that maybe you only want to see it based on a certain kind of effect or mode or a certain name. And those will be the only layers that are visible. In addition to that, as we move across here, we can see that we have, you can filter for pixel layers. And right now they are all pixel layers. So it won't make any difference. But if we start to use vector graphics that are built into Photoshop, maybe you only want to see the pixel layers and not the vector ones. If you only want to see, for example, adjustment layers, then we could click on here. If you only want to see text layers, you can click on here. If you only want to see layers based on shape layers, those are the vector components, we can do that. And if we click on the next one here, we can filter for smart objects. So these are just basic filters available to us here. There's also a little flyout menu up here to the right that allows us to do many of those things. It's really teeny tiny. It's hard to see. It's a little hamburger symbol there. Also, when you create a layer, you can view it in normal mode, but there are a number of different modes available to us. And as I hover over each of these, you can see how it changes the appearance of that image considerably. In some cases, like if I say lighten, it goes away entirely. So some of these modes won't be beneficial, but you'll see in the middle of this lesson that, for example, overlay for us will be very important. It'll be a good one when we duplicate the layer and we want to intensify the color and the vibrance of the pineapple. So those are that. Those are the different modes. By default, we start off with the normal mode. We can also control the opacity of a layer. It starts off with 100% opaque, and you can break it down to any percentage from 0 to 100. After that, the next group down here are different ways to lock. You can lock layers based on transparency, painted images. You can lock them so they don't move. you can lock them any number of different ways, or you can just lock the whole thing, lock every aspect of it, so that you don't accidentally draw on it, you don't accidentally move it, you don't accidentally do anything to it. Fill is similar to opacity. I rarely ever use it, but if you wanted to fill, for example, a layer with a specific color, and you only want it to fill at 50%, you would do that. I would probably change the opacity instead of using fill. That's just my preference. And here we have all of the layers. So I just pointed out. Down at the bottom here, if you wish to link layers together, you can do that. So for example, if I select the flower, I hold down the Command key or the Shift key, and I select the pineapple, I can select this little link symbol, and you can see that it appears to the right. And when they are linked together, then if I use the Move tool, notice that they both move in unison with one another. If I were to resize them or color them or do whatever, they would work together as a unit. When you select them, you can always click again to unlink them. You don't need just 2 layers. You can link multiple layers together, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many as you want. The next item over here are your layer effects. There are several of them. It's kind of you have to demonstrate restraint sometimes so that you don't use too many of them. The ones that are used very often, though, are the drop shadows. In this particular lesson, we will use that, as well as Satin, to enhance the images that are given to us. So that will be one of the things that we do. In the next lesson that I will be covering on Wednesday, I'm skipping, by the way, lesson 5 for the time being, and we're jumping to lesson 6. And we'll work with layer masks. So that will become a really, really important lesson for us. So we'll do that. And at that time on Wednesday, I will talk more about how to start your first assignment, which will be to do the postcard assignment, or the, what did I say, that you could do the selfie photo bomb instead, either one. The next one over here is these are also adjustment layers right here. Now, while they are here, they're kind of a holdover to an older version of Photoshop, because all of those adjustment layers are also found in this panel here. Okay, these are all of your adjustment layers, and we've already used some of these. After that, we have folders. These are groups. They're folders that allow us to group elements together. So for example, if you want to put all of your type layers together in a group, you could do that and put them in the folder. That would be an example. Another little tab that we have over here is for creating a new layer. And if we want to delete a layer, we click on the little universal symbol for the trash can. So that's, the panel for layers in a nutshell. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn off the flower, and we'll bring it back on a little bit later. One of the first things that they want us to do is to put in a background of clouds. Well, there is a feature that's available to us up here under filter. And under filter, we can go ahead and we can go to render, and you'll see that we have one that's called clouds. But what it's going to do is it's going to use the foreground and the background color to do that. Okay, these filters are permanent. So I recommend that when you do work on them, you work on maybe a copy of a layer so that you don't accidentally mess it up. All of the adjustment layers over here are non-destructive. Most of the filters up here are destructive unless there's other ways around it, but be careful when you use them. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the background layer like so. Just going to click and drag it on there. If you ever want to move layers up and down in the stack, you can just simply click and drag and move them up or down. It's that simple. Or you can use keystrokes, and that would be Command. And if I hit the right bracket key, which is 2 keys over from the P key, it will move it up. If I hit the left bracket key, which is the key immediately to the right of the P key, it moves it down. Okay, so I've made a copy of the background. Not that I had to, but why not? So what I want to do is I have white, and I'm going to go back to the default foreground, background, and then I'm going to flip them so that I have white in the foreground. Then I'm going to click on the background here. And instead of gray, I want to put in here instead maybe a light blue. So how about this one? And I know the book probably specifies like a cerulean blue or something like that. It's something that's easy to edit and change and manipulate. So I'm going to pick this blue right here that I picked from our color spectrum here. And I'll click OK. Now what I can do with the foreground and background selected, I can go up to filter, making sure that I have my correct layer selected. And I can go to render and I can select clouds. And voila, I have clouds. If I do it again, if I go back to filter and I hit Shift Command F, it will do it again. And every time you hit Shift Command F, it will give you a different pattern. Come on, come on, come on. I don't want to fade it. I just want another one. So let's go to, maybe I did it wrong. Shift. I rarely use this feature except to demonstrate it to you guys. I'm going to go back again. And I'm just going to select clouds. See how I got a different pattern. For me, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Typically, I don't use this filter because it doesn't look that natural. It does in this particular instance, the way we're using it in this lesson. But what I would prefer to do would be to use an actual image of clouds for if I were going to change the background of a photograph or something like that. And there are many cloud images that you can get off the internet that are high resolution, that are really, really very good, that would be worth using. So that's how that works. So the next step here, we have our pineapple. Well, we want to enhance it. And if we look, let me look at the one over here real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off a bunch of, let's turn off the Hawaii here. I'm going to turn off the flower. Where is it? Not that one. Let's see. There we go. If I turn off the flower, compare the colors and the intensity and the vibrance of the color in the finished pineapple versus the one that we're given. The pineapple is a good photograph, but I think we can dress it up a bit and make it a little bit nicer. So I'm going to select ours over here, our start file, and I'm going to duplicate. To duplicate layers, you can do it one of two ways. You can hit Command J, or you can click and drag the layer on top of a new layer and it duplicates it. We've done absolutely nothing to it, but it maintains its original size and position so that they're layered directly on top of one another. Now, this will be the first instance in which we are going to go ahead and we're going to use a different mode for this layer to enhance the layer underneath it. So instead of normal for this layer, I'm going to click here and I'm going to go to overlay. And this is what they used. That's a good one. Actually, overlay or soft light, either one. They suggest overlay. I would probably want something a little bit more subtle, which is soft light. But I'm going to go ahead and adhere to the lesson right now, and we're going to use overlay. So notice the difference, big difference in brightness and contrast and vibrance of colors. So there we go. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on the flower up here. And we're going to dress it up a little bit too. You'll notice in the final version, we have a drop shadow and they've enhanced the color a little bit. I kind of like the flower as it is, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another adjustment layer to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the flower layer. And then at the bottom under effects, sorry, I said adjustment layer, I meant effects layer. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the drop shadow. So that's the one at the very bottom here. And if we have preview turned on, you can see that it's already here. So what they have given us is that what we want is to make sure that the opacity is 20%, I think. Oh, that's for Satin. No. I forget what the settings that they use. It looks pretty darn close. So I'm going to go with maybe opacity 75%. That's the default. And we can adjust the angle of it a little bit, like so. So it goes over just a tad. So that's what you can do there. Actually, maybe I did go overboard with the opacity a little bit. We'll draw it back a little bit. You can also adjust the distance. You can use the slider, you know, how far apart you want the image from the shadow. Okay, so I'll go back to the original 5 pixels that they used. I'll leave it at 14 there. You can adjust the spread. So it's the same distance, but it's making it a little bit wider. And then you can adjust the size and that softens it. So how soft, how hard do you want the shadow to be? So I'll make it maybe 5, 6 pixels to soften it. So as I've added this effects layer, notice that directly beneath the flower layer, we can see that an effect has been added and it tells us which one we want. As I said, all of the effects layers as well as adjustment layers are non-destructive, which means that I can either turn them off at any time. I can also double click on them to make adjustments to them if I'm not happy with the current settings. The other thing that I can do as well is I can just click on it and drag it into the trash can and throw it away. So that's one thing. We're going to go ahead and add one more to this. So let's add one more effects layer. We're going to add Satin to this. And it gives us this default kind of pinkish color here. What we want to do is we're going to change the opacity, make sure it's 20%. We're going to make the angle here. I'll leave it at 19. We can go up a little bit. And I'm going to change the distance of it. So make sure that it's 22 and the size 14. So it looks like I've already done these. And so I haven't gone back to the original settings. But notice again, when I click on it, I click OK. Underneath the flower layer itself, we see effects and we see Satin. We can turn on and off and change, it will. And we can also adjust the order of these as well. And sometimes that will have a dramatic effect on your image. So the other thing that we want to do is we want to bring in now the photograph. So this is what you're going to be doing with your postcard or with your selfie photobomb assignment. You're going to take multiple images and join them together. In this case, it's sort of a photo collage or montage. With a selfie photobomb, it's a little bit harder, more difficult to do because you want to seamlessly integrate yours with it. This approach, it's clear that they are, manipulated and combined together. So what I want to do is I want to grab another photo that they have provided for us. And it's this beach image right here. So to combine it with the one over here, what I need to do is use the move tool. and I click and I drag and I bring it up to the start file. And when that's done, then drag it down and release. And you can see that it placed it directly above the flower because that was the last layer that I had selected. Well, I want it below the flower. So I'm going to click and drag and make it above the pineapple, but below the flower. I can move it wherever I want, but it's a little too large. And that's really kind of a good thing because we want to maintain its crisp sharpness and make sure that it remains a strong image. And if we have a small image and we enlarge it, oftentimes you'll get blurring and pixelization. Photoshop over the years, it's been a subtle but important change is that they have improved that property considerably and that you can enlarge images quite a bit. But until you actually print it, you really won't know whether it works well or not. So I would try to, when you bring images in, I would reduce them a little bit in size or enlarge them a little bit, but try to keep them close to the size that you need. There are better ways that we can cover later this semester of reducing images in size or enlarging them. So anyway, back to the lesson. To change the size of this and to rotate it. So I'm going to go back over here and I want to see the finished version over here. There we go. There's the finished version. Click here. Make sure that I have the correct layers selected and it's titled, layer 1, but I'm going to go ahead and name it beach scene. So beach, double click on the text, beach scene. There we go. So we've renamed it. So to transform this, Command T, that's something that you should memorize. If I want to constrain the proportions, you hold down the Shift key. If I want to resize it from the center, I hold down the Option key. I get it about the size that I want it, and then I go ahead and I move the cursor outside. You'll notice that it changes to a curved double-headed arrow. Now I can rotate it a little bit like so, and I can move it into position. And when I'm happy with it, I just go ahead and I click the checkbox up here, and that's it. We're good. One more thing that they want us to do, they want us to add another layer effect to this. Notice there's a little white border around it. Again, this is something that is as a layer effect. It can be, it's non-destructive. It can be turned off and on and edited at any time. So I'm going to go under effects, making sure that I have that layer selected, and I'm going to add a stroke. Now, what I want to add is I don't want to add a black, but I want to add a color, white. We can adjust. There aren't too many things that we can adjust. We can adjust the size of it. We can adjust the position of it, inside, centered, or outside. I'm going to make it inside. I'm going to adjust the size of it to maybe a 3, 4-point rule and leave it white. And I'm going to leave the opacity 100%. Now, again, all of these things can be changed whenever you want. So there we go. We've added that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to go in the same order as the book, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the little postage thing now. You can see that that's above everything, and that's okay. That can be above. Let's make sure that we select that little postage symbol here. Whoops, I didn't want to move that. I want to make sure that I select the postage layer. There we go. Move. Oh, shoot. Come on. Got to make sure that I select it and not something else. There we go. I'm going to move it into position, but it looks a little harsh. It's nice, but it looks a little harsh. So let's adjust the opacity of it. Come up here and tweak it a little. They want it to be maybe 30, 40%, something like that. Yeah, maybe 30%. Why not? There we go. Again, you can always edit it. You can always change it. It's non-destructive. So the next thing that we want to do, let me come back over to the finished version here. And let's turn Hawaii back on. Now, this is text of Hawaii, but it's non-editable. It's been rasterized. But you'll notice that there's a gradient fill and there is a green outline. The gradient how to apply a gradient is what I will show you next. And then we will use a layer effect in order to create an outline in green for this. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and come back over to our image over here, our start file. And I need to turn Hawaii on. So there we go. So if I were to apply a gradient now, and I select the gradient tool, by default, it gives us a gradient here that maybe I want. Let's go ahead here. I don't want circular, I want linear. And that is done here. Let's pick a color from here. Let's go to, I want my foreground and background color here. So what I'm going to do, if I select the basic colors, I could use, this is the foreground and background. Well, if I were to change the background color, so let's go ahead and here, let's click the background, and I want it to be a nice orange. So I can pick from here. I don't want web safe colors only. Or I can come over here and I can put in, instead of the hexadecimal numbers, I can switch here and I can switch to CMYK sliders. Or I can click from in here and I can click on the color spectrum, and here's a nice bright orange. And I'm going to go ahead and click this one, and I want this one to be white. So I have orange and white. Now, if I click and drag on my image here, and I go from start to finish, watch what happens. Not what I wanted at all. I'm going to undo and go back because it's applying it, number one, to the postage image. I wasn't paying attention. I need to make sure that I have the Hawaii selected. But even if I have it selected, if I click from here to here, watch what happens. It fills the whole thing, that whole layer with that. I don't want that to happen. Okay, I need to create its own layer to make sure that it's non-destructive. So how do I get it to fill just in the word Hawaii? Because answer my own question to make sure that it's, because it is rasterized, what I want to do is if I hold down the command key and I click on the little Hawaii icon, it takes that image and it applies the marching ants to the perimeter of it. So now the gradient will only be filled inside there. But do I want it on the Hawaii layer itself? No, I'm going to create a brand new layer on top of it. And now when I apply the gradient and I click and I drag like so, notice how it fills. Now they used a little bit darker color. So let's undo. Let's come back and let's pick a little bit darker. I'm going to add a touch of black to this. Let's go ahead and make a little bit more red. Let's see. And I'll try again. Click and drag like so. Hold down the shift key to constrain. And it's still even darker yet. So I'm going to go back in here. Let's pick that. And that should be closer. Even if it's not, we're okay. No, oh, it's bugging me. A little bit darker. A little bit lighter. That looks about right. Hold down the shift key, pull it up, and there you go. Again, not quite the same, but we're good to go. They have changed. I mean, I can go to swatches here and I can pick from here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this one and I'm going to click and drag. So if you don't want to use the sliders, you can always use that. Yeah, that's already one that I've picked so far. So let's pick, let me see if I can't, you know what? I'm going to click over here and I'm going to see if I can't take the eyedropper and click from here. And I pick that. Now, if I come back over here to this one, let's see if I can't. It kept it. So I'm going to use their color. So now I can come back again to our image here. And now I'll go ahead and I'll hold down the shift key and click and drag. Whoops. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Make sure that I use the gradient. Click and drag. That's a case for locking layers, so you don't accidentally. Now it looks pretty good. When I don't want them anymore, I hit Command D to deselect, and I have it. But you'll notice we still are missing the outline. So with the word Hawaii selected, okay, now I forgot to put that on a separate layer. I should have done that, and I still can, or I can go back and I can always fill it. But now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and with the Hawaii layer selected, I'm going to hit effects and I'm going to select stroke. This time, instead of white, we're going to pick a nice green color. So I'm going to go ahead from here. Let's pick green. And that's as good a color as any. We're going to go ahead and pick something a little bit darker. Let's try this one and let's see what we have here. Click OK. And that looks pretty good. I can go back again if I want to change the width of it or change the properties of it. I can, because you'll notice that as an effects layer, it added it here to the layer itself. If I double click on it, I can decide that I want it inside. How about if I want it outside? Okay. If I want it a little bit thicker, maybe I want it to be 5 pixels instead of 4. I can do that. So I'm good to go. A couple more things that we want to do here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add Island Paradise. And we're also going to bring in another flower from another source. And we're going to change its properties a little bit. We're going to add hue saturation to it. So those are the next 2 things that we'll do. And we'll be done. Oh, then we have an outside border up here to add, and then we'll be done. So this is going pretty quickly. So let's go ahead, and it doesn't matter where we put, but I'm going to go ahead and at the very top here, I'm going to go ahead and select the text tool. And I'm going to click here. And let's select Island Paradise, create, just I'll type it in here, all caps. Come on. Select all. And we need to change the color. So if I want, I can click here. And I can also pick from a color I've already used. If I move outside and I click the little with a target inside the green, notice that it picks the green that I already created here. So I need to make sure that all of that is selected first. I kind of goofed. Click again, pick the green inside here. There we go. Click OK. Click the checkbox. We move it over with the move tool, move it into position. Now, to get the right settings for this, something that we didn't do that the book tells us to do, because we really haven't gotten into text that much yet. But when we select this and I highlight it, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Let's undo or just say cancel. We click inside it. There we go. Say select all. Let's look at our properties panel here. And we can see in the properties panel that we to make this fit, we changed the tracking a little bit. It's set to 250%. The point size is 32, which is what the book wants us to use. We only have one line, so we can use auto letting, and we're good to go. If you want it, set it a little bit farther apart, we can do that. We can click here and spin it, make it a little bit wider. There we go. And we're set, we're good to go. And I'll go ahead and I'll check the box and we're good. But notice how it doesn't read that well. And this is something that when you're working on your own postcard or later when we work on our movie poster, to consider that when you have text on a background that has a lot of texture, that you want to make sure it reads properly against that, with multiple colors and images and that sort of thing, that a drop shadow is a good source for it. So with Island Paradise text layer selected, I'll add the effects layer and I'll go ahead and I'll add the drop shadow. And let's see what it gives us here. And this needs to be changed a little bit. So we're going to make sure the opacity is set to 75%. Again, I'm going by the book right here. We want to make sure that the angle of this is 78. It's something that you can play with yourself if you want. We're going to make the distance 5 pixels. We're going to make the spread 30. You can see how I change each of those elements. It's affecting it in, right there, and under size, we're going to make it 0. Okay. So probably need to pick a little bit lighter green, but we're good to go for our text. So we've added some text to it, put it beneath the word Hawaii that was rasterized. And the last thing that we need to do here is to bring this other flower in. So here's flower number 2. Okay. And they've already isolated it for us, which is really kind of nice. So again, I'm going to use the same system here. I'm going to click on the move tool. I'm going to click and drag up to where it says start file, and then drag it down and then release. Now you can see it's much too big. The order of it, because I had Island Paradise at the very top, is in the wrong place. So now I need to move it down. So let's go ahead and move here. Let's move layers up a little bit. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command, and I'm going to hit the left bracket key and move it down, down, down. It needs to be above the pineapple. So we're going to put it there. And now I need to shrink it. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform it. You can see it's pretty large. So I'll move this down a little bit. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click and drag to reduce it in size a little bit. We have part of it hidden off of our screen here. Needs to be a little bit smaller. Move it up like so. We're in good shape. So I'll click the check box to make sure that it's okay. I'm going to zoom back in a little bit so we can see what we're doing, but you'll notice that the flower is sort of purple. Well, they want something that's a little more pink. So there's another way that we can change this. And another one of the effects that we can use, okay, is an adjustment layer. So the adjustment layer that they want us to use is the second row down, the first one. And this is, we're going to use hue saturation. Now, there's going to be a gotcha here, something that goes wrong with this. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on Use Saturation. And now what I need to do is I need to change the hue. And from 0, they want us to adjust it to a number 43. It's just moving it towards the blue and the color wheel. Now, notice that as I'm changing that, everything beneath it is being affected. Don't worry about that just now. We also want the saturation to be changed to 19, so it's sort of a bit more intense. Okay, a little bit brighter, not so muted. There we go. So how do I get these layers that are beneath it to work? It's a reminder to you to let you know that when you use an adjustment layer, it affects every layer beneath it. To have it affect only the one layer beneath it, is you have to do the following. You hold down the Option key and move the cursor in between those two layers, and you'll notice that the little icon changes. As soon as it changes, I click, and now it affects only that layer beneath it. It only affects the flower layer and nothing else. If you want to turn that off, you hold down the Option key again, move in between the layers and click, and you'll notice that it goes back. So there we go. One final thing for us to do, and we're done today. And that is, we need to add a border to this whole thing. All right, so I'm going to go to the very top here. I'm going to create a brand new layer. And I'm going to hit Select All, Command I, or Command A, so that marching ants go around the whole thing. The next thing that I want to do is I need to go up to, for whatever reason, the effects layer won't work. I can't add a, unless they've changed it in the current version, but I can't add it to an empty layer like this. The only way I can do that is to go to File. I'm sorry, go to Edit. And I want to add a stroke. So it's under the Edit menu. I go to Stroke, and I want the color to be white. So I'll come down here and add white. I want the size to be maybe 5 pixels. And if I put it on the outside, you won't see it. If I put it on the center, you will only see 2.5 pixels. So I want it to be on the inside. And I want the mode to be normal. And I'm going to click OK. And there we have our border. But notice it is on its own layer. Command D to deselect the pixels, the marching ants. And I can always, if I decide, or the client decides, you know what, that border really is unnecessary, I think it sucks, or I need it to be wider or narrower, you can do that by isolating things in their respective layers. And it works really very nice for us to do it that way. So layers were added early on in Photoshop. I think it was version 3 that they were added. Before that, in version 1 and 2, it was a real pain to do this. You had to really plan out your illustration, in advance to make sure that they were layered correctly on top of one another, because you couldn't undo. You would have to save multiple versions. You would have to really plan, as I said, in advance, so that you layered everything correctly without the use of layers. So that became an important element, and has been a useful one ever since. In addition to that, they added effects layers, and they made sure that they were editable. That's within the past 10 years or so. They've added multiple things like that, the adjustment layers, the effects layers, and that sort of thing that weren't always there, but they're really nice and they work well here now. So before we leave today, you have any questions about layers, what I would like you to do is, or I will cover it more on Wednesday, but I'm going to talk about the first assignment a little bit. And when we begin talking about adding layer masks, which will be important, especially if you include people or soft images to your first assignment. You'll have about 3, maybe 4 weeks to work on that assignment. And then you'll upload the original Photoshop file to our shared Google Drive folder. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, then we're going to call it a day. I will say goodbye. You guys are free to leave. And I will go ahead and stop the recording, and I will post this within an hour or so. Okay. That's it for today. Unless you have questions, let me know or shoot me an email. Okay. Bye-bye.